Yes, yes. When you understand the meaning of this season, when you understand who and what the Christ is, that it is a reality that lives within you. It is not a person that lived thousands of years ago, but it is the knowingness within you that it is always born and reborn again. And so when we affirm, let every heart prepare love room, this loving presence, prepare your heart. Prepare yourself to receive this love and allow this love to live, move, and have its being in you, to express in, through, and as your life. Because we recognize, I said it in the prayer this morning in our VIP huddle, that we recognize, as A Course in Miracles teaches us, that every act of fear is a call for love. Have we been seeing acts of fear in this country? Have we been seeing acts of fear throughout our nation, throughout this planet? It's a call for love. Let every heart prepare love room. We need your love. That's what's happening. The earth is calling for you to be the lovers that are needed. Let every heart prepare love room. Thank you, Soul 21. Thank you, Nadia. Well, we're going to jump right in. So in week one, for those that don't know, The Greatest Gift, this series is inspired by the short story, The Greatest Gift, which then inspired the movie, the Christmas classic, It's a Wonderful Life. And so that's what we've been talking about this month. In week one, we started with the cost of believing the ego. The ego is insane. It tells lies. It does not have your greatest good in mind. And so often we listen to that voice. So often we hear those words that tell us that we're unworthy, that we don't matter, that why should we even be here? Maybe it's better that we're not even alive. These are the words that George Bailey believed, and we understand the cost of believing the ego can get you to a place of being on Christmas Eve, near about cussing out all your kids and your wife and the teacher, getting in a fight in the bar, and then ending up at the bridge ready to end your life because you think that it would be better that you weren't even born. That's the cost of believing the lies of the ego. In week two, we talked about the stranger. In the short story, it's not an angel. We have Clarence the angel in It's a Wonderful Life. In the short story, it's just a stranger. I love, actually, that the writers took the inspiration from that story and opened it up because they made Clarence a more dynamic character, that he was an angel second class, wanting to get his wings. And I talked about this idea that the stranger shows up in our life just when we need it. And I shared a story of an encounter that Pastor Yolanda and I had many, many years ago, well before we were even thinking or entertaining any idea about CSC. We had only been dating about 3 or 4 months at the time. And he told us that we would together do some things that would impact the world and change and inspire lots of lives. And yeah, it was just a powerful moment. And so we recognized that that was just what we needed to hear to plant the seed to bring us to where we are today. So the movie It's a Wonderful Life is a wonderful movie. It's one of my favorites. I love to watch it. I've already watched it once. It was on USA the other week. I don't know. Anybody know when it's coming on NBC? Maybe this weekend. And, you know, I love to watch it, but I think that there's a problem. It's something that nobody talks about. Because we get to this wonderful ending, right? It's wonderful. Everything is resolved. He gets more than the $8,000 that he needs. And Old Lang Syne is sung at the end. And you got the bells. And, you know, the bell rings on the Christmas tree. And so we know that Clarence got his wings. You know, it's awesome, right? But what bothers me is that George never realized his dreams. One of the things that we're presented, when we're presented with George and we look at his life, what's clear is that he's a massive dreamer. He has these big dreams and goals and things that he wants to do. And we actually hear about this for the first time. If you remember that scene after George and Mary were at the dance, and they're walking home and they're singing, you know, Buffalo Girls, won't you come out tonight? Won't you come out tonight? Right? You remember that scene? And they're walking by the old Granville house, which later becomes their home. And he tells Mary he wants to throw a rock to see if he can break one of the windows. And she was like, no, don't do that. I love that house. I would love to live there. And he said, no, what you do is you throw the rock and you break the window and you make a wish. And so she says, what do you wish, George? And he says, well, not just one wish, a whole hatful. Mary, I know what I'm going to do tomorrow and the next day and the next year and the year after that. I'm shaking the dust off this crummy little town, off my feet, and I'm going to see the world. Italy, Greece, the Parthenon, the Colosseum. Then I'm going to come back here and go to college and see what they know. And then I'm going to build things. I'm going to build airfields. I'm going to build skyscrapers 100 stories high. I'm going to build bridges a mile long. And as he talks, of course, Mary is listening intently. And finally, she stops and picks up a rock as well and throws and makes her own wish, but she doesn't tell him what it is. And so as I was reflecting on this story, I thought about the title. If I was George Bailey's pastor, if George Bailey was in our 4Ts prosperity program, yeah, right? If George Bailey was in the 90 Days to Greatness program, what are the things that I would say to him? How would I work with this dear brother who is a big dreamer, and I recognize that he believes the voice of the ego, and beautifully, because of the way love works, the way source works, it met him where he was to solve that crisis, but still, what happened to the airfields and the skyscrapers and all of the things that he said he was going to do and shake this dust off this old crummy town? And so there are three things that I would say to George Bailey. First, I would tell him that, George, sacrifice leads to disappointment. The second thing I would say to George is find gratitude where you are. And the third thing I would say to him is that you don't have to prove anything to anyone. So the first, sacrifice leads to disappointment. Now, A Course in Miracles talks about sacrifice in a very interesting way. In lesson 323, it says, I gladly make the sacrifice of fear. The only thing we ever need to sacrifice is fear. It goes on and it says, here is the only sacrifice you ask of your beloved son. You ask him to give up all suffering, all sense of loss and sadness, all anxiety and doubt, and freely let your love come streaming into his awareness, healing him of pain and giving him your own eternal joy. Now, the way we're presented with George, one of the things that we're supposed to admire about him is the way he's continually sacrificed, right? He lost his hearing to save his brother. He stayed behind so his brother could go to school, right? He gave money to Violet, right? He does all of these things, right? Sacrificing, never thinking about himself. But where did that lead him? Ultimately, he was pissed off, right? When we look at that climactic scene, I highlighted it in week 1, that climactic scene after he's fussing at Mary and fussing at the kids, what does he do? He destroys all of his architecture, all of his designs and his models. Because that was the reminder of this dream that he had let go of. That was a reminder of all the ways that he had sacrificed throughout his life. And here he is in this moment of crisis, trying to do the right thing, trying to keep the family business going, trying to keep the Bailey name intact. And now his silly old fool, as he calls Uncle Billy, has lost the money. And now they need $8,000 and they're facing scandal. And he was pissed off. He was disappointed because sacrifice always leads to disappointment. Hear this word today. The only sacrifice you are ever asked to make is the sacrifice of fear. To give up suffering, to give up all sense of loss and sadness and anxiety and doubt, and freely let love come streaming into your awareness. It's the only sacrifice you ask for. That's what I would say to George Bailey if we were talking. But I would move forward. And I would also say to him to find gratitude where you are. Now, this is an interesting principle because we recognize that the nature of life is that we're going to want more. It's inevitable. No matter how great your life is, if you become a millionaire, eventually you're going to be like, well, what about $1.5 million? What about 2? What about 5? What about 10? What about 100? It's inevitable, right? That's just the way it works, right? You may have a good job now and eventually, or a salary that you love, and then you're going to realize, wait, there's more, right? It's the nature of life. So you don't have to worry about the desire for more to come up, but what we often do is our desire for more shows up because we don't like where we are. Our desire for more is because we're trying to run away from something. And the thing about when you try to run away from something, wherever you run, there you are. Wherever you run, there your vibration is. And so it's interesting because as he was sharing with Mary about this dream that he had, beautiful dream that he was going to travel the world and go to Italy, Greece, the Parthenon, the Colosseum, and he's going to come back and go to college, and he's going to build things, airfields, skyscrapers 100 stories high, and he's going to build bridges a mile long. There's something else interesting that he said. I'm shaking the dust off of this crummy little town off of my feet, and I'm going to see the world. Bedford Falls, the town that made him. Bedford Falls, the town that shaped him. He would not be the man that we've come to love. He would not be the man that we were introduced to without Bedford Falls. But he calls Bedford Falls a crummy little town. He wanted to run away from something. He didn't appreciate where he was. Now, it's interesting, and I shared this in the Think and Grow Rich group this week, because so often, as I say, find gratitude where you are, it's like, but Pastor Greg, I don't know how I can find gratitude where I am. I don't like this job. Pastor Greg, I don't like this relationship. Pastor Greg, I don't like this bank account balance. Pastor Greg, I don't like the way my kids are acted. Right? Now, it's interesting because in Scripture, and this was written by the Apostle Paul, it's written in the letter, in all things give thanks. But over the years, that's been misinterpreted as for all things give thanks. And so if you have an unwanted thing, if you have an unwanted illness, we're not asking you right now to be grateful for the illness. But what we are asking you to do is find gratitude where you are. In all things, give thanks. So even if you can't be thankful for your broken leg, you can be thankful for the arms that work. You can be thankful for the eyes that see. You can be thankful for the ears that hear. You can be thankful for the health insurance you have that lets you go to the doctor so that you could get the bone set and heal. In all things give thanks, not for all things. Now, the higher principle, eventually you will learn this because you'll look back and you realize that everything was working for your good. Right? The Joseph story, Joseph, Lord have mercy. There's no way that Joseph could have been grateful for all the things that he was lied on. He was thrown in the pit and sold off into slavery by his brothers, right? All of these things. But he got to the place where he realized that everything that was meant for his harm was actually designed for his good because everything was this perfect story that unfolded. I'm often reminded of the conversation between Bill Moyers and Joseph Campbell when they talk about you can look back over your life and you realize there were hidden hands the whole time supporting you. Now, again, in the moment, it felt unwanted. In the moment, you were like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this, or I just want this to end. I want this to stop. But you can look back over your life now and see the perfection, how it unfolded. That's the higher principle. But when you're in it, no, we're not asking you to give thanks. Obviously, George Bailey wanted to move away from Bedford Falls. Obviously, there were things that he wanted to see, things he wanted to do, things he wanted to have, and we celebrate that. But don't call Bedford Falls crummy little town. That was the town that made him. That was the town that gave him his values and gave him a purpose. That was the town that taught him how to interact and be a community-loving person the way that he was. It was the town that taught him, even through his father's example, to honor families and not just throw people out on the street. All of these things, he got that from being in this so-called crummy little town. George Bailey, find gratitude where you are. And finally, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. Now, what's so interesting about our lives, we can all look back. There are seed moments in our lives. Seed moments when we were children that we interpreted the world a certain way based on what we thought was going on. Because in truth, as children, we never have all the information. We think we do. And as a survival mechanism, we kind of figure out what do we need to do best in order to not upset the big people, right? And it's interesting because in the movie, there's a seed moment. There's something that happens. If you remember in the story, we have George Bailey. He's a kid. He's working at Mr. Bauer's store, Gower's store, sorry. And Mr. Gower, he's upset because he just got news about his son, and he accidentally uses poison instead of the medicine that was supposed to be given. And George was supposed to deliver the medicine, but he saw that it was poison, and he wasn't going to deliver it. He went to his father's office to talk to his father to get some advice. But as we go into the scene, we see that his father and Mr. Potter are having a conversation. Law of attraction is so interesting. because this is actually the same experience that George Bailey experiences as an adult with Mr. Potter. His father needed $5,000. George Bailey needed $8,000. And he's walking in, and his father pleading with Mr. Potter to give us more time. And Mr. Potter, he's unwavering. He was like, you need to just foreclose on the people's homes. If they're not paying, because I'm not going to sit here and just continue to lend you money and you're not profitable. And there's something that Mr. Potter says. He says, you and your brother, he says, you're miserable failures like you and your idiot brother. That's what Mr. Potter calls George Bailey's dad. And George walks in on this and he defends his father. Don't say that about my father. He's the greatest man in town. And I recognize the seed moment of this because George Bailey had a chip on his shoulder then. I got to prove that the Bailey name is worth something. I got to prove that my father's work wasn't in vain. I got to prove that we're not just miserable idiots and fools. I got to prove this. And so there was something within him. It's so interesting how we do this. We take these ideas, very small moments, and we start to craft a life based on it. And what's interesting is creation and manifestation is a natural part of life. Think about this. Now, within a rose bush is programmed the desire to express itself as the beautiful flowers we all love. We just laid my aunt to rest yesterday. And one of the things that we marveled at, we were at my grandmother's house after the service and the repast, and we were marveling about how beautiful the flowers were. Just beautiful roses, purple roses, white roses. They were just beautiful. It was wonderful. And we know and we love and appreciate the beauty of flowers. We recognize that a rose bush is programmed. The thought of within it can't help but express this beauty. We understand that, right? And because we know then that a rose doesn't bloom to prove its beauty. It doesn't bloom to prove its worth, to clean up the family name of the Rose family, right? It just expresses who and what it is, right? Its value. It expresses who and what it was created to be. Well, as humans, it's the same way. We have the same programming to create and demonstrate beauty through our lives as we allow thought to manifest in the form. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're just like that rose bush. Your roses, your flowers, your beauty is inevitable if you allow it. But what happens is when we're trying to prove it, then sometimes, some roses come out looking right, some don't. You're trying to prove it, and then you're looking, well, that other person's bush, what kind of water do they have? And let they add something to, well, why are their leaves so green and mine aren't? Right? All of these things we start to get into proving. But more importantly, as George Bailey did, then we abandon our dreams. Because he couldn't do the things that he desired to do and try to clean up and prove the Bailey name and the Bailey building and loan in Bedford Falls. He had to stay home to keep that name intact. But again, if George Bailey was here, I would say, brother, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. So this is an interesting thought, right? It's fun. It's fun to use our imagination to talk about, if I was George Bailey's pastor, if he was in one of our classes, what would I say to him? But the truth is, he's a fictional character. Truth is, George Bailey is not real. And more importantly, I am not his pastor. But as we are co-creating this moment together, and as each and every one of you have chosen to be here today, I say these words to you. Sacrifice leads to disappointment. The only thing you need to sacrifice is fear. The only thing that you need to give up is feeling that you're less than. Give up sadness, give up anxiety, give up doubt. That's the only thing you ever have to sacrifice. Please sacrifice that. Let it go. Because if you try to sacrifice anything else, it will lead you to disappointment. George Bailey is a fictional character, but we are here today, and I say to you, find gratitude where you are. Now, I'm not asking you to be grateful for all things. I realize that sometimes that's just not possible. But you can find gratitude in all things. The principle, the way vibration works, if you turn your attention to any place, thing that you are grateful for, eventually that vibration becomes your dominant vibration, and then you can look at the problem and get an inspired idea. Then you can look at the problem and see it differently. Then you can look at the challenge and realize there's another way out. Then you can look at the challenge and then a phone call comes out of nowhere with the answer that you need, with the response that you need. Do I have a witness up in here? Do we know? Yes? Does it happen? I know it does. And finally, George Bailey, he's a fictional character, but you are a real flesh and blood human being. Powerful creator. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Your worth and your value is inherent. Just as we would never ask a rose bush to prove its beauty to us, we just celebrate and expect its beauty because that's what it is. We expect it to blossom. We expect it to bloom. We expect it to bring joy. We expect it to be an expression of love. We expect it to bring smiles. So we expect the same thing of ourselves. Not proving anything to anyone, but simply being the very manifest glory of God. With that, I invite everybody to stand. We are grateful and thankful for this movie, this story, It's a Wonderful Life, and the greatest gift that gives us the opportunity to look a little deeper at our own lives, because we recognize that these stories are archetypal. We recognize that although they are fictional characters, they represent aspects within our very own being. Because all of us have been George at a time. Some of us have been Mr. Potter at a time. We've been Mary at a time. We've been the kids at a time. And every character in between. And what's beautiful about movies and about stories, it gives us the opportunity. I love this idea. Just sit with this for a second. What movies and stories give us the opportunity to do is to play out a vibrational pattern without actually living it. See, so often we think, oh, well, let me make this choice and see what happens, and then we go down the pit and got to go down and have a terrible time. Don't do that. Watch the story. Look at what George Bailey did, and then don't do that. This is what's beautiful about our imagination, that we get to actually play out. Because the law is always working, even in fictional stories. Why? Because they're being created through us. There's only one law that's always working. And so we still get to see how vibration plays out. It's such a gift. And this is why actors are such a gift. Because they allow themselves to step into that space and show us what the vibration looks like if we make that choice. What does the vibration look like if we stay in that relationship? What does the vibration look like if we invest here versus there? What does it look like if we don't start the business? What does it look like if we sacrifice our dreams? What does it look like if we put everyone and everything ahead of ourselves? What does it look like if we try to prove our family name? Thank God for this story. Thank God for George Bailey as he shows us what it looks like so that we can choose differently. And from wherever you are right now, you can make that choice. Whatever choice you make from right here, the universe changes and organizes itself around that choice right here, right now. I don't care what happened earlier today. I don't care what happened yesterday. I don't care what happened last year. You make the choice right now, the entire universe changes based on your choice. So whatever it is that you want to change, whatever it is that you want to move, wherever it is that you want to grow, choose differently right now. I invite you to just close your eyes right now. Make that choice within yourself. Talk to the God within you right here and right now and make that choice, whatever that choice is. We know we're moving into a new year in just a few weeks. Are you choosing to live your best year ever? Are you choosing to succeed? Are you choosing to live all of your dreams? Are you choosing to have a new experience? Are you choosing to have a new relationship? Are you choosing to have a new relationship with money? Are you choosing to create a family? Are you choosing to get married? Are you choosing? What are you choosing? What are you choosing? What are you choosing? Make it right now. As you are choosing in your mind's eye, in your mind's ear right now, you are talking to the God within you, and the universe, the entire universe is organizing itself around that idea, around that choice right now. Oh my goodness. We hear the wisdom of our dear brother Paulo Coelho in The Alchemist. The entire universe conspires to support you in realizing your personal legend. Your personal legend is the choice. Your personal legend is the desire. And so as the universe always says yes and amen to that thing, as we have affirmed that it is responding to you, we now affirm and line up with that truth by saying amen, amen. Ashe. And so it is. And so it is.